I've had a psilocybin journey once that was, oh my God, one of just the pure ego death and everything therein. But it was like, it was on a beach, and I was there with like my girlfriend at the time and two of my best friends. She had never done it, and I was kind of the the facilitator in a way, and it was from a same guy that I got it from before, and so I was assuming, because the last batch we all took an eighth, that it was like, I was like, yeah, I probably could have had more. It was actually felt pretty mild, which is a terrible assumption to make, because these things grow out of shit, and they're going to vary based on every single batch that there is, and so I took like 4.5 grams, and they all had like an eighth. And and
that was their first time, you said?
It was my girlfriend's first time.
She had an eighth on her first time?
Yeah. And because I had beforehand facilitated with like 6 friends, and like 4 of them had never done it, and we all had an eighth. And it was a perfect amount. And for me personally, I was like, I could have, could have had a little more. I could have gone a little deeper. And lo and behold, that was full ego death for everybody but one of my buddies, who is like 6'3", 280, and it ended up being the perfect amount for him. But for everybody else, it was hanging on for dear life in a 15-minute hike to the nearest bathroom, like the porta pot. And so you had a daunting journey in front of you whenever, like a very strenuous hike too. If you wanted just to go to the bathroom, like people everywhere, it's like all the unideal places of not having a safe place to kind of retreat to. And it was the 7-hour journey, full ego death, full like no one can save you. We all knew it. We were like, we even had a point where we just huddled together just to touch each other, so that we could all try to attempt to feel grounded in reality. Just trying for a second, but human touch meant nothing. Like nothing. Like it was just. Really? Oh yeah. It was. We were gone, and by the end of that, I mean, it was an insane journey. But by the end of that, when we finally kind of started coming out, and were able to leave, you felt like we just fucking stormed Normandy and like marched all the way to Berlin. Like that we were like these trauma bonded soldiers who just went through hell together, but came out the other side. And there was like a reward to that of like survival, of like a bonding of like knowing that you made it through. Like you made it through something that perhaps not everybody might, like, cause when you hit the ego death place, as it's a very trying experience, and you have to have, like I said, the ability to let go, but also just mental fortitude, and strength and resolve to know that you're gonna make it through. And it felt like that to me. So that's why I like the whole idea of the hero's journey, because it's like a perilous journey that no one can save you. Your mission is what it is, and it's to make it through and retain what you're going to take out of it. And not all are like that, obviously, like, they vary, but,
there's usually an ineffability component to ego death and everything. And I'm curious, like, do you mind explaining that for people? Like, I would love to hear what you would call it.
I mean, to me, ego death is essentially the vaporizing of all things that make you, your identity in every form. So we've made up our identity, our story, and this is, I'm sure, very much a lot of what has gone into in Jay's book as it pertains to consciousness and the stories we tell and everything that's therein. But we have a story, and part of that story is that first 10 years of impressioning that, was put upon us from people who raised us, where we were raised, what we believe. And then, people who come along later in life, either authoritative figures or influential peers who also mold that perspective of who we are. Sometimes we're told who we are, and then we have our belief of who we are. And that makes up our identity, along with our gender, along with the human condition. Like all of this stuff is what makes up the ego's definition of who we are and what we are and what that actually means. And when you have an ego death, all of that vaporizes. Everything that you have that ties you to this existence, that makes you like, I am Nate. I am Nate, the human man. and my story is this. All of that fucking disappears. I am nothing. I'm immediately nothing, and I am everything in that moment. And it's like the vaporizing of that ego, that story that has been told, and the realization that you aren't that. You are all things. You are all things at once, and are experiencing, this particular existence right now. You're occupying this carbon-based meat suit, and that is that is a current experience, and that experience comes with, biological evolutionary programming of, the human condition and other components that, we are faced with in this experience, this existence. But it's not you. It's ultimately not you. It is ego. It is the story. And when that vaporizes and goes away, suddenly you realize, I'm not that. I'm much more. I'm all of these things. I'm connected with this God source, or whatever descriptor we want to put on it. But I am all things, and I am nothing. I don't know. That's been the way I've tried to kind of describe it to people, but it's just basically the dissolving of story and ego and everything that we identify with as our existence and our experience. And that suddenly goes away, and everything that ties you to this reality and this experience is gone. And you are now one kind of with all things.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. And so the ego, as I was saying earlier, is underpinned by that default mode network. And when that gets knocked out, and like it gets knocked out during a good flow state, and if people aren't sure what a flow state is, if you're downhill mountain bike riding, or you're snowboarding down a mountain, or you're doing some sort of, or maybe you're writing really intensely, or editing or coding or something like that really intensely, and you lose track of time, lose track of yourself, lose track that it's like, oh my God, it's 7 now, and I've been locked in writing for the last 3 hours, but it felt like 2 minutes. That's a flow state.
Yep.
And so, we live for those moments, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah. And so like when it happens at a music festival, or it happens at a concert, or some sort of, I don't know, say you're going to a political rally or something like that, and you become one with the crowd, they call that communitas. Flow states have the capability of healing. And it's not just flow states, it's these mystical type experiences, these transcendence experiences, these ego death moments, and they don't have to happen on a psychedelic. They can happen on a flow state. They can happen while you're surfing. They can happen when you're meditating. And so it's all, when you get down to it, it's all about this default mode network that's happening in your brain. And the thing about depression and anxiety is, when you study the people's brains who have depression and anxiety, we see they have a hyper default mode network. It's densely connected. There's too much connectivity, because people that are depressed and anxious have a tendency to ruminate. They think about the past and what happened, and how wrong they are, and how bad they are, and how they shouldn't have said that thing. And then they think about the exact same thing again. So they run this pattern, boom, 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 boom. This happened. I'm so bad. I'm so bad. So it's this negative recursive feedback loops that they get engaged in. And so when this happens, what are you doing? You're disconnecting from the present moment, and you're living inside your head. These are all instances when the default mode network is turned on, but when it's turned off, what do you get? Bliss from a flow state. Time expands like an accordion. You having these experiences of ego death, ego loss. But what are the benefits of these things? When the self gets knocked out for a second, then other parts of the brain that maybe might be trying to tell you something are allowed to speak. These experiences of ego death that you're talking about, like there's 4 things that we find in common with most of these transcendent experiences, or actually all these transcendent experiences, because it's just the 4 mental rites of passage that you have to go through that leads to healing. And so just in quick format, it's DEMP. So DEMP, dissolvability, elasticity, malleability, and possibility. So the first one we've kind of already touched on, which is dissolvability of established brain networks, like the default mode network. So many mental disorders are underpinned by the hyperactive default mode network, or some sort of hyperactive other network, large scale network, like the central executive network or the salience network. So if people with PTSD, for example, they have hyperactive amygdala, so a hyperactive salience network, emotional salience network. So their fear response is turned on way too quickly and way too loud. The thing about this dissolvability component is, when you have your ego dissolved through flow states, or through meditation, or through psychedelics or something like that, then you're able to see some of the patterns that are maybe destroying you. And that would be the first component of how these things are able to catalyze massive transformations in people. We're talking about breaking 10-year addictions in a week on something. How is that possible? Well, this 4 mental rites of passage: dissolvability of established brain networks. Once the default mode network gets dissolved, that's when the downloads start to come. Mark Hayden, the director of MAPS in Canada, he had a great line, which is, psychedelics increase the permeability between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Mushrooms are a very different animal when it's 2 grams versus 5 versus 10. It's completely different. Like, you will not believe how different it could be.
Yeah.
And so if you can imagine that, like, there's like these floodgates of sensory information and floodgates that separate the conscious from the unconscious, they might open a little bit on a flow state. They might open a lot more on a psychedelic. They might, they can get full blown open. And at that point, there is no self, there is no ego. You are stuck in the subconscious land. That in itself is a trip. But yeah, should we move on to the next one?
Yeah. Keep it going.
Okay. So that was D. Now we're going to go to E. So elasticity. So the elasticity of time. One thing, if you study any transcendent experience, is that time starts to dilate. Your experience of time can stretch or shrink. You've had a near-death experience. I've had a near-death experience, maybe a car wreck. Did time slow down for you?
Oh, for sure. Hey everyone, thank you for clicking on the video. If you enjoy, please make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and share with everyone. And if you have time after, please make sure you go to nateknighttalks.com and check out the NNT community and research database. Thank you.